Please be seated. Who sinned is a difficult but legitimate question. May not be one that you have asked in quite this way, but if you think about it a little bit, think about a time when you maybe passed someone on the street who was sleeping rough and thought, how did they get in that situation? What sequence of choices led to this? Are they struggling with addiction or mental health, or maybe they're just out of options? Or maybe you wonder, are they trans or queer, or are they someone who the church has too often told is the answer to the question, who sinned? Because of the climate that we live in today, when we see someone who might be an immigrant because they speak with an accent, or they have darker skin, or they simply look different from whoever we've decided looks like they belong here, it's very easy to have the thought fly through your mind, are they here legally? Now, that may not be a conscious thought, and you might correct yourself immediately. And I'm not saying that everybody does have that thought every time, but I can't honestly say that I've never had that thought, which is another variation of who sinned. As the devastation in the Middle East continues to escalate, we hear other versions of this question buzzing in our news feeds constantly. Who started it? Whose grievances are legitimate? Who's really the aggressor? Who's really the victim? It becomes a furious and heavily armed argument over who sinned. And so maybe John here is just letting the disciples say out loud those things that we often keep to ourselves, those uncomfortable questions that we all have at times. But remember, they are legitimate questions because history matters, right? Cause matters. Accountability matters. The truth matters. And we often believe that if we can find the cause, if we can identify the failure and assign some blame, then we'll be able to start making sense out of all of the suffering that surrounds us. Because having someone or something to blame is reassuring. Who sinned? Not me? Whew, thank goodness. But then there's Jesus' response to this. And he doesn't really answer the question, does he? More like he completely dissolves it. Who sinned? No one. Because to Jesus, the man in front of him is not a metaphor or a moral puzzle to be solved. He's a human person. And so what does he do? He reaches down and he grabs a handful of dirt and spits in it and makes some mud and gets to work. And that sequence, I think, is the key. Because Jesus doesn't say that cause and accountability don't matter. It's just that there's a real, live human person in front of you who needs something. So help first. You can do the historical critical analysis later. Don't let the blame question get in the way of compassionate action. Because here's the thing, the moral confusion that is often generated by the blame question actually benefits some and harms others, especially when it preempts actually helping. Keeping the who sinned question alive and at the forefront often benefits the elite, the powerful, the status quo, in this case, the Pharisees, because as long as we keep debating, real people continue to suffer, but never get any help because the debate keeps them in a state of never being quite innocent enough to deserve care. Keeping the blame question front and center, for example, benefits those who maintain a workforce perpetually one medical bill away from catastrophe by making sure that the question of who is responsible for poverty is never, ever resolved. Because the time spent debating whether or not poor people have made bad choices is time not spent talking about wage gaps or housing costs or what it actually takes to keep a family alive in this country. The questions surrounding immigration have been unresolved for decades, in part because those who benefit from cheap, desperate labor very much want it that way. Keeping the question of blame in Israel and Gaza and Lebanon and Iran perpetually unresolved, while I get that these are complicated issues, but keeping them permanently unresolved certainly does benefit arms manufacturers and the governments that fund them, because as long as we're arguing about who sinned, the mechanisms that produce suffering just continue to churn. And as Che said to Evita, when the money keeps rolling in, you don't ask how. Now, I want to be very, very clear here. I am not in any way suggesting that there are no guilty parties, or that everyone is equally culpable, or even that history and facts are irrelevant. It's not what I'm saying. I am saying that people under the rubble don't need a verdict before they're rescued. And every day spent arguing over who sinned is a day that those who profit from the argument are very grateful for. Jesus subverts all of this by simply reaching for some mud. And the man himself is subversive as well, isn't he? Because he doesn't enter into a theological debate with the Pharisees. He just keeps saying, I was blind and now I see. He knows what happened to him, and he refuses to let it be argued away by anybody. So neither Jesus nor the man let the blame question deter them from doing what's needed to be done. There's a table in Psalm 23, isn't there? You know the one, the table that is spread in the presence of those who trouble me. Not after they've all been sorted, not after the question of blame has been resolved, but in the very presence of it, right in the middle of it. This table, which we set here each and every week in the midst of a world full of people who trouble us, is open to all, isn't it? And our presence at it is not in any way contingent on the blame question. We don't card you at the door, we don't run background checks, we don't put you under surveillance, and we don't wait for all of the arguments to be adjudicated, because the abundance of God is offered freely to all who hunger or thirst. And so the real challenge that this gospel presents to us, I think, is this. Does what we do here on Sunday around this table actually make any difference in how we live Monday through Saturday? Because remember what Jesus does. He doesn't launch into a lecture about how we shouldn't even be asking the question, who sinned? He simply picks up some dirt and spits and makes some mud. So here's the question. What is the mud that we are being asked to make right now? What is the healing that we can offer that is made of things that are close at hand? Because, friends, we are not going to solve generational conflict in the Middle East, or comprehensively reform the immigration system, or eradicate the wealth gap all by ourselves. And I know that you all know this, but I'm going to say it again anyway. All of those moral quandaries in the world are made up of people who are suffering. And Jesus doesn't wait for the arguments to be resolved. He sees what's in front of him, and he reaches for the ground. And I believe that with God's help, we can do the same. So what is the mud that you are being called to make today? Amen.